My name is Angela Voss, and I am Jordan Sheard's mom. Jordan was a beautiful baby. I remember after he was born, he was 5 pounds, 15 ounces, and he was about a month early. Through the pregnancy, I remember being very diligent about saying that I didn't want drugs through my labor, and I had Jordan naturally at 17 years old. He was precious and perfect and the model baby. The very first time we ever seen anything wrong with Jordan was his lazy eye at about 3.5 months that we had discovered. And about 13 months old, Jordan had an episode in his crib where he was bashing his head off of the rails of the crib. And the doctor said that might have been just a behavioral issue, although I knew that Jordan had just been sleeping and woke up doing this behavior. We didn't see anything else with Jordan. He was bright, beautiful, happy, smiley child, learned super fast, toilet trained himself as soon as he seen somebody else going to the bathroom. Brilliant as a child until he got to school, when they said he was extremely hyper and had a hard time paying attention. At that point, we went through several doctor's appointments and clinical assessments to say that Jordan had ADHD, and tried several medications that were not effective for Jordan. During this time, Jordan's had moved about 11 times between being a year old and being about 6.5 years old when I left his father. Our life was continuously moving and transforming as his father had a mental health disorder that was extremely hard to compete with. So when I left, the abuse continued, and Jordan was the first-hand representative of that abuse. Just financial abuse. His dad would steal my checks, money out of my bank account, damage my car, not pick the kids up when the kids were expecting him, and just a continuous of them telling him his mom was a bad person. The first time I went to court to fight for custody for Jordan, he was a year old. And I fought my ex-husband's family, and I fought him as well. And I won custody at that point. I won custody again when Jordan was 5 years old. I won custody again when he was 6, 7, 8, before the judge finally decided that Jordan's dad could not take me to court anymore without paying me for my time, because he was wasting the court's times, basically. And it was seen that it was an abusive, malicious act that he was taking me to court to try to get me to lose employment and not be able to provide for the kids as well as I was trying to. So in 2001, I finally got full custody of Jordan at the discretion of me for him to even see his father. But it was an ongoing battle between his family, who were wonderful people, and I wanted them in the kids' life. They were very important to me and to the kids. Kids loved their grandparents and their aunt. But it was a continuous struggle about the dad. He would get into relationships and try to be a part of their lives and be a good person, and then he would be out of their lives and not be around and not be supportive. Back and forth for years. Jordan had gone through these type of behaviors with his dad. And when he was 12 years old, Jordan started experimenting with marijuana. And
what did you find out when he was 12?
I actually didn't find out that he had experimented with marijuana until he was about 17 years old. But I noticed behaviors in our house, and him sneaking out of the house. Little things. I worked night shifts for 12 and a half years with developmentally disabled people, but my grandmother stayed with me as well, and my mother periodically, and my brother periodically, because we were the support network. We were the most stable, we'll say, to support those people that were having a hard time. So Jordan also got to live through that, a grandmother that he did not like, and was very disabled herself. But Jordan was very good to her, actually, outside of the fact that he would sneak out. And we found out later on that he was sneaking out, but I couldn't wake him up for school, and crazy little things that, how can you sleep so much? Well, it wasn't that he was sleeping so much, it was the fact that he was out all night long and there was nobody to really notice or to discipline him in a way that he needed. Said that we had a person that lived across the street, and he would give it to them all the time. And my ex and I both smoked marijuana, but very little amounts. So he would steal it from us, but we wouldn't notice because we smoked very little. So, but he was honest and did tell us about it later on. When we was 14, we really noticed different psychoses in Jordan. And he had a charge for a break-in entry with a friend that lived across the street again. And he got to be into a program through New Path finally. And I thought that this was like a saving grace for Jordan, but they just didn't have the right type of program for him. He enjoyed going to see the lady, but he didn't really want to talk about his life and about the experiences of what he was going through. And then he stopped with New Path. He had finished that off. Jordan had gone to live with his dad for a few months because he was being abusive with me and sneaking out of the house. He stayed with his dad for about 6 months before coming back to live with me. And we changed our schedule around. My husband now was available to take care of Jordan and Nathan, my younger son, when I was at work. So that was working out really great. Jordan came home. His dad went to jail. They said for unpaid child support, out of which turned out to be not true. I don't know why he actually went to jail that time. But Jordan, as soon as he heard his dad went to jail, he went through this real defiant, really angry, I can't even describe the switch in his person, the complete emotionless kind of to complete tears. Like it was either one or the other, either holding in his emotions and trying to be hateful or completely distracted, and was one of the major events that happened in Jordan's life, because Jordan went missing from my house and I called the police and I looked for him, of course, like every parent would. And we found out he was across the street with this 40-year-old of our old place where we used to live, and they were feeding him oxys. So when I called the police to go pick them up, or pick him up because I found out where he was and what was happening. The police said that they couldn't help, they couldn't intervene. So when I went to the house, I walked in and I dragged my son out, and they said they were going to call the police and stuff on me, but I mean, I'm a mom, and I seen what was at harm for my son. So I had him home for a couple of days. He was extremely sick. I didn't know at the time, and not until recently actually, that he was probably in withdrawal. I didn't realize the severity of how much Jordan had been using oxys and how long it had progressed. Jordan was home for a few days before our dirt bikes went missing. And then our radio, and then money out of our purses. And every time we would discipline Jordan or ground him, his grandparents, who lived just a couple of doors down, would come down and scream and yell at us. And finally, Jordan decided that he was just not going to listen to us anymore, and he was going to go and stay with his grandparents. And because I was like, well, you have to follow the rules or you can't be here. And he went and stayed with his grandparents, and that's when his problem with opioids really exacerbated. And I didn't have a communication open enough with that family to really see the damage that it had caused with Jordan and I not being present in each other's lives. He was using Oxycontins at that point, and went to Percocets after that. And from Percocets, he went to heroin. Well, he tried crack, cocaine, and other things, but he didn't like any of those other drugs that he had tried. It was kind of like when Jordan was first diagnosed with ADHD, he was put on Ritalin and Adderall and all these different medications that just spaced him out. But it seemed like as an adult, that's what he was looking for, was just to be null and void of all of these emotions. And then Jordan got into some really big trouble when his grandmother passed away. His use, that's when he started with the heroin, and just his whole life started falling apart from
What do you mean the big trouble?
big trouble, like just dealing heroin, dealing marijuana, dealing whatever he could to make enough money for a habit that he was trying to maintain. He did have his own apartment, and he did go to school. He worked extremely hard. I honestly thought he was doing better because he had such a great face when he got to see us and was around us as a family. And then after his nanny passed away, he would come to my house and say, Mom, I'm sick. I need to just curl up on the couch. And I'd be like, oh, you don't have the flu, do you? Because I work in healthcare. And like, I can't be near you. Like, and I think back now and I think, oh my God, I'm such a jerk. Like, my kid needed me so bad at those moments. But here I'm thinking about a stupid flu and my clients. But I didn't know about withdrawal. I didn't know about heroin. I didn't know really about any of it. Like fentanyl, I remember hearing it on the radio and saying, Jordan, it's terrible stuff. Like, it's killing people. And oh yeah, Mom, don't worry. Like, no, you don't even have to worry about me. And I believed that. Jordan wasn't generally a liar. And I never asked him the direct question, if you were using heroin or have you tried heroin? Because as soon as I did ask him those direct questions, he was directly honest with me. And I think that broke my heart, is because I never thought to ask those questions. He was kind of going through with these withdrawals and all this stuff, coming back home, suffering through this stuff without really any support except for, I love you, here's a blanket, got to go to work. So I feel like I kind of failed him, but he kind of failed me too by not letting me know what he needed. because how was I supposed to know that world? I've never lived in that world. I came home on a Thursday night after Jordan had decided he was going to come home. Said he was really sick and he needed to come home. And I was like, he loved his apartment. He loved his car. He loved his life, his freedom. And when he wanted to come home, I was like, he's like, Mom, I'm just having a hard time making ends meet. I'm working all the time. I'm going to school. I just need to come home. And I was like, of course, Jordan. I mean, we've been begging you to come home for years. I mean, absolutely. So we moved him in. Actually, he moved himself in. And I came home on the Thursday night, and he hadn't come home. And I messaged him. And Friday, no answer, no message. I started calling around all of his friends. Nobody had heard from him. Everything was great before he left. He seemed awesome. He moved all of his stuff in. He seemed happy and healthy, and I didn't know he was using, and probably at a really good dose for him to be in a good mental state. Because on the Sunday when I came home from work, my house was full of police officers, and my house was being raided because they had allegations of a gun being in my home. And I knew Jordan was scared, and I knew that he was paranoid, but I never knew to this level. I just thought he was being unrealistic, and his trauma from his father and stuff like that was really bothering him. I felt that was what was going on with him. So the police came. They said that Jordan was arrested on Thursday and that they had found a significant amount of heroin, cocaine, cash, and weapons and jewelry and whatever else in Jordan's car, amounting to about $130,000. And I can't even explain to you what happened to my brain. It was just like, are we talking about the same child? Yes, I know he smokes weed. Yes, I knew he had dabbled in the other stuff. I also knew he didn't like the other stuff because I was directly honest about asking him about crack and cocaine. But heroin and fentanyl, I mean, I literally went back to work for about 6 months with my head in the ground. I don't really remember. I just remember being completely out of my body with unknowing. This world I just stepped into. And the police officer came to my house after they had found nothing in my house, by the way. We actually had found everything in my house after the police had left. My son, my youngest, had found a loaded gun in our laundry basket. And it was wrapped in a sock, and the safety was off. So anyways, we didn't open the sock. We found it was a gun, and we were like, So we called the police to come and pick up the gun that we had found. And while the police were in our house, the female police officer looked at me and said, yes, well, didn't Jordan just almost die? And I was like, well, how would you know that and not me? Like, how would they not be telling me this kind of stuff? And for years, I never really thought anything more of it. Because in my head, I was just trying to do la, la, la. I gotta go to work. I gotta figure out what's going on. My family's important. And I just wanted to put my head in the ground like an ostrich. I was embarrassed. I was astonished. Like, my kid is a beautiful young man. He treats his mother with utmost respect. and I understand he gets really depressed and stuff, but this is not something that I really predicted from Jordan. So I didn't really learn about heroin. And I got to be honest, like the time that Jordan spent in jail was about 2.5, almost 3 years. And I did everything I could to not learn. And I'm like so sad because I wish I did, but I couldn't. I just could not face it. Like I was devastated, absolutely to the point of like not even wanting to live. I worked for 6 more months and I just couldn't even go to work anymore. I just couldn't function. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't breathe. I just, and Jordan would write me these letters and say that he was going through all these methadone clinics and all this stuff. And it still didn't, it didn't even, like, I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know. And I did everything I could to not. So when Jordan got out of jail, we were so happy. And I just did the mom, la, 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 I love my kid. I just don't want to. I don't want to think about him like that. I don't want to, because I know he's a beautiful person, and because I know that what happened to him is not his fault. Like, the kid's sad. He comes from my depression, and plus his dad's bipolar. So I really just seen his sadness. Like, he's just to see that smile one more time, like, just, but his sadness was just unbelievable. Like, his heart didn't break. It shattered. And he would get over things, but it would take him time. And I can't say that getting over anything is going to not take time. But Jordan would be shattered, just like I was when I found out about the heroin, and it took me 6 months for it to really even clue in to me what was really going on around me, because my world was just shattered. And when I couldn't get out of bed and I couldn't breathe and I was looking at my child. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I was, oh my God, this is what my kid is going through. And for some reason, that resonated with me, that he's shattered. He's not a mean person. He's so good to me and other people in his life. He's got some of the most loyal friends that are still my loyal friends, because he's beautiful, because he's a beautiful person, because he was fun, loving, and because he was loyal and committed. So when Jordan got out of jail, he immediately went into high school classes to upgrade to go to college, because he was really excited about doing that. And he was on probation, so he was doing all these recovery classes and such. And that is where he met Nikki. Jordan dated Nikki for about 3 or 4 months, and he really, really wanted to do everything for this girl. And I guess he decided he was going to start dealing drugs. Again, he wasn't using drugs. We knew he wasn't using drugs because he had passed all of his tests through probation. And so I guess he was dealing drugs through her, or I didn't honestly ask those questions.
How he met this girl?
He met her through a program that they put him in through his probation officer, for recovery, for people to stay recovered for a longer period of time and to make sure that they don't relapse. He dated Nikki for about 3 months before she got pregnant. And then the police were called on Jordan again, but they didn't find anything viable in the house, but the damage was already done. They picked him up and put him back in jail and said he had violated his probation. Those charges were all dropped. But Jordan still spent 2 months in jail because he was on probation. We couldn't bail him out until his probation was over because of how much money that they wanted for bail. So we waited till the end of October until his probation was over to bail Jordan out. When we bailed Jordan out, he wasn't himself. Like, the kid was just so traumatized. And then Nikki lost the baby. And he was so excited about being a father and so happy. His world was crushed and destroyed again. Jordan started beating himself up and throwing himself around the house and choking himself and paddles of things, like just screaming and rolling around on the ground, ripping at his clothes. We didn't know what it was. So again, we put him into the hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. The police officer was really, really good came to our house to take Jordan to the hospital. But when Jordan got there, he really didn't receive any assistance. Like, he didn't come out with any medications. They didn't tell me about drugs. They didn't let me know nothing. So I brought Jordan home, and within 24 hours, he's acting like this again. He's beating himself, rolling on the ground, screaming, top of his lungs, and we would all take shifts watching Jordan, and we were like, is he schizophrenic? What is going on? But the doctors didn't say anything. And then I'm calling the health unit, like, we don't know what's going on. And they're like, well, we can make an appointment, which is 7 months down the road, for a psychiatrist. That wasn't helpful. And Sunday night, Jordan was really behaving strangely, and I grabbed a hold of him, and I said, I just need to hold you, Jordan. And I held on to him sitting on his bed, and he, passed out. And I slipped out of the bedroom and went into my room to go to bed. And the weirdest thing, I swear to God, I heard like a freight truck coming through my front window. It was the weirdest thing, and I woke up out of horror. And I was like, okay, nothing's happening. And I ran into Jordan's room for some sick instinct, and Jordan had the death rattle for about 4 or 5 seconds, and he died. While I was on the phone with 911, he was dying. And I started CPR. I broke 3 of his ribs, and he just kept dying. So the paramedics come in and they revive him, and he died again for another 20 minutes. And then on the way to the hospital, he died again. And when he was at the hospital, they finally put him on life support, and they told me he wasn't going to make it. And they really treated me like crap. And still at this point, I had no idea it was an overdose. I didn't know. They told me heart attack. Somebody said opioids. But in my head, my kid's dying. And the head doctor comes to me and he's like, well, he says we have a 50-50 chance of saving him if we prone him and put him on his stomach. He says, but if he goes into cardiac arrest again, we can't do anything if he's on his stomach. So I agreed, because anything is better than no hope. And he survived. I couldn't believe he survived. And after 5 days, they took him off life support. And he just progressively, like a newborn baby, learned all of these skills again. And I was his caregiver. I never left his side. I just stayed there the whole entire time. I slept there, we ate there, we did everything there. The only thing I didn't do was shower. So I left an hour every day to go home and shower. But watching him recover was what I needed to really learn about fentanyl, really learn about heroin from Jordan. Because it wasn't going to be anybody else that could teach me these things. And I was well aware of that because of the situations that we had already gone through. And although Jordan beat himself and hurt himself when he was using fentanyl and these benzoprines and stuff, that was the only time he felt alive. And like he was out of this shattered soul that he had. Jordan recovered. He went to Toronto. He went to a rehabilitation center. We learned how to re-walk. He learned to shower himself. Although he did joke around for a long time and tried to pretend like he couldn't shower himself because he wanted me to do it for him. Which is pretty crazy. He was definitely a card. He was so much fun. 4 days after he got home out of the hospital, Nikki died. Jordan, the week before he got out, decided he wasn't going to talk to Nikki anymore because it wasn't good for him, his recovery, and he was never going to go back to that life. So he got home, and then Nikki died. And the kid was shattered. Like, you can't even imagine how sad someone can be. Like, he was just shattered. And of course, he went to her funeral, and he stayed so strong for about 2.5 weeks before he relapsed. And he was having a really hard day that day, and I called a friend of his that used to come into the hospital and feed him, and Jordan used to laugh with her all the time. So she was coming to visit. So I told Jordan, she's here, and he didn't come downstairs. And so I went back upstairs after about 10 minutes, and I was like, this is weird. Like, he knows she's here. Like, we would hear him moving because he was disabled, so we would definitely hear him trying to come downstairs. And I went upstairs, and Jordan was dead with his head curled into his bed. And I screamed for 911 and went through the resuscitation. There was no Narcan in our house. When we were asked, actually, about rehabilitation for Jordan, both Jordan and I thought that was ludicrous after what he had just gone through. But he was happy and healthy at that point when they asked him. So sent him to the hospital, and then when he came home, he had Narcan. 4 or 5 hours later, I found him dead again, and I Narcaned him, and then 10 hours later, I Narcaned him again, and then 2 days later, he was seizuring really, really bad, and they told me it was the withdrawal. So I was at the hospital with him all night. We actually slept in my car all night because I couldn't get him to get out of the car. And we went to get Safe Supply. And I was like devastated. I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? And they denied him Safe Supply. What? He didn't have enough in his system to be considered a substance use disorder. Jordan went into the bathroom, and I never seen him again after that for 3 days. He never came out of the bathroom. He slipped out the back window and went to get what he needed. And about a week and a half later, after he was completely broken, everything he had was sold,
he came back and said, well, I should test for safe supply now. So we did safe supply. We did that for about a month. And then he relapsed again when his buddy died. And he used for another 3-4 weeks. And then we got him on safe supply again. He was on the safe supply program right through Christmas that year and into January. But he had met a new girl that was also a user. And he was actually sharing his safe supply with her. And he relapsed. But he only used 2 or 3 times. And then he beat himself up so bad he could barely move in the 3 days that he had used. And then he went to stay with his dad in Stouffville because it was so far away from everything here with us, right? And him and Lindsay, the girl that he was dating, were still together. Jordan was just working on his recovery, and he really devoted himself to it. Like, he really decided that this was it. He was, he was doing better. He started working out. He got on this vitamin path. We took him to a natural path, and I had talked to different career organizers and stuff because Jordan's big thing was, who was he now? After all the heart attacks and the disability, and who was he ever going to be? Was he ever going to be able to be somebody or do something productive with his life? So I tried to reinforce it and show him that there's lots of things that he could do. And COVID happened. And slowly, as he was working out, you could hear it. You could see the depression was starting to happen. We couldn't see each other on a regular basis like we were. And then he called me and said, I applied for the CERB. And I got it.
What is CERB?
That was the supplement that the government was giving to low-income people. Jordan was on a disability. He shouldn't have gotten the CERB. It was not for him. But he applied for it, and he got almost $5,000. And he spent that money on drugs and started using again because Lindsay had broken up with him. So we got the message that Lindsay had broken up with him because Lindsay and I had kept pretty close contact. And Jordan was already using and was in psychosis and was at his dad's place beating himself up again. And so we called 911 and had the police come and escort him back to the psychiatric ward for another assessment. And we searched the house to find the drugs that Jordan had purchased, and we couldn't find anything. We searched everywhere, but we know because we took everything from Jordan. Every time the police came to our house, everything he had, we would give to the police. So Jordan would actually hide it in his bowels so that it was a place that he knew we couldn't get it from. We told the psychiatrist this and that we knew that this was happening because we knew he'd gotten the CERB. We had access to his accounts. I mean, like, Jordan was still disabled. Like, he didn't have full capability of making a lot of decisions. So anyways, I actually missed a step in his story because when Jordan left Lindsay's place, he left a bunch of stuff behind, and his dad wanted to go back and pick it up, and Jordan was like, no, just leave it there, leave it with Lindsay, doesn't even matter. And Jordan had planned to go back to Lindsay's place. at some point. He just needed to recover and be strong enough before he could be in that neighborhood where the drugs were at. His dad picked up this stereo, and inside the stereo, the speaker, was a gun. Jordan wasn't with his dad when he picked up the stereo, but Jordan was at the apartment. Jordan stayed at the apartment all the time for his own recovery good. And when they got there, anyways, Jordan cleaning up this stereo and getting ready to set it up, they find this gun. Jordan freaks out because he, I guess, is thinking that it's probably Lindsay's gun or somebody in the house, because the house that he took it from was full of rentals of people that were using. And it was a very peculiar situation that was going on there. It was scary for everybody that lived there. So anyways, Jordan hid it. Immediately went to hide it, and the cops came and he gave it to them. I mean, oh my God. So anyways, they charged Jordan with the gun because he had a previous history.
It's a rifle or handgun?
It was a handgun. It was just a little tiny pistol or something. It was, the speaker was only like little. So I was shocked that they would even find a gun in such a little. Anyways, so yes, Jordan goes back to jail. His dad bails him out. Now he's on house arrest. That's why the psychiatrist suggested that instead of Jordan being in the psych ward, that he would have to go back to prison and deal with the fact that he had drugs on him. I don't even think the psychiatrist was listening to us telling him. I just don't think he even believed what we were trying to say because we were being so bloomin' honest. You know, I mean, this family comes at you and is like, okay, my son's got drugs in his bowels, he's doing this, but you have to understand that some families are very active in their families' lives. I mean, we watched everything Jordan did. We knew who he was. We tracked his behaviors. We were very active in his life. Jordan was transferred from Markham Stouffville Hospital to the police department, and then for a bail hearing, and then to Lindsay, to Central East Correctional Center. He was there for 4.5 hours before they noticed he was overdosing. Jordan admitted to having stuff on him, as per the coroner's report. They sent him to the hospital. Jordan was in complete psychosis, banging his heads off the rails and the kind of behavior like I have described. And they released him back to prison like that. The nurse's notes were, patient is not stable enough to be returned to prison, but they returned him to prison. And Jordan just continuously overdosed. They put him in a room by himself for many hours. They did the scan for him, the body scans, but they did those twice, and nobody knew how to read the body scans. And that was on the coroner's report, that it was confirmed that they were there, but nobody knew how to read it. And then Jordan, I guess, was yelling out and pushing at his bowels and crying. And they decided they were going to give him Gravol. And Jordan fought them because he knows that Gravol is an interaction and you can overdose on benzoprines and Gravol. We were very, very diligent about teaching Jordan about all the interactions because we had experienced everything with him before. I mean, we were very close to his use. And he died 20 minutes later after they gave him Gravol. So he was naked for the last 12 hours of his life on a cold concrete floor.
It didn't matter how much I screamed or how much honesty that I gave people. I couldn't save him. And it just drives me crazy because I just think if I had brought him home, maybe he would have died, but like that. You know, that's like horrifying. I mean, he knew he was continuously overdosing. And his coroner's report, it says he was continuously pushing at his bowels because he couldn't get it out. To me, everything that happened to Jordan was preventable, and they just failed him. And I don't understand how they could fail so dramatically and still not have any charges, not be accountable for absolutely any part of that. When Jordan first passed away, and I received the most unholistic phone call from the doctor at the hospital. Your son is dead, but you can't see him because it's COVID. Like, if my husband hadn't have been there, I probably would have drove right through the emergency department. Like, I just was so angry because I'd screamed for help for my son, and now he's dead. I mean, like, what any mother would have probably felt the same way I did. I want to see my son. And my husband, like, held me back from going to the hospital, and probably gratefully, because I probably wouldn't, I probably would have had charges or something terrible happen to me in response to my grief response. I thought the investigating officer was going to be a really great guy. He told me I could watch the video of Jordan while he was in there. And then I found out that every detail that investigating officer gave me was a lie. So I didn't even find out how Jordan really died until 9 months later when I received the coroner's report. Everything I was told from the correctional services, from the investigating officer, everybody, they lied to me. So when I read that report, it was like I went from Jordan committed suicide and just used too much to dying to suffering an entire freaking weekend with multiple chances to save his life that people just ignored, right? So I've been on lots of panels and lots of different things to try to tell Jordan's story, because I don't want anybody else to feel that way, that they can call to these people for help. Because you have to have that oversight. You have to, like, as a parent, whether they're in jail or whether you're not, if you're a parent that cares, then there should be a spot for you. There should be somebody for you to answer the phone on the other end. Because family is important, especially when people are so vulnerable as Jordan was. He needed his mom, and clearly he, was suffering with something that he couldn't control on his own. So I just keep advocating, just keep trying to bring awareness to Jordan's death. And not just Jordan's death, but there was 200 and I don't even remember the exact number of how many people had died in corrections. 23 other people died just in Central East the year Jordan died. But we don't hear about it. I really genuinely thought Jordan would be safe. That they could give him better, or do better for him. Not give him better, but do better for him to prevent his life from ending than I could. I really believe that if the system would take some responsibility and accountability, there would be policies. So when I reached out to the College of Physicians and Surgeons about Dr. Tang and his recommendation to put Jordan in his psychosis into jail, they said that there was no protocol. Well, there should be a protocol for anybody within those situations. And actually, although they say that there is no protocol, when I've investigated other hospitals and stuff like that, there is a different protocol. There's many different protocols, but every hospital has their own jurisdiction of what they're going to use. And if we have protocols all the way across the board that remove stigma, and help people get through these things, i.e. letting me know that he had a drug addiction, maybe not so much tell me the privacy aspects of Jordan's life, but how to prevent things if something does go wrong at home. Because, I mean, he could have been found dead with 2 younger brothers at home. I mean, he was found that way many of times with his younger brothers at home to witness. So I really think these protocols need to be in place. And when people or nurses or doctors step outside of that protocol, there needs to be some kind of a disciplinary action. Because otherwise the stigma just keeps going on and they just keep getting away with stuff and people keep getting through this system that they don't fit in. Like, I might fit into your box of care because I have my whole life. I have taken different antidepressants. I have, been modified by the medications given to me by a doctor. But there's other people, such as Jordan, where their psychosis is just so different that they didn't take the time to learn him as an individual instead of putting him in one box and saying he needed to fit there. And I think with Jordan, anger issues from everything that he had dealt with through his life, that made his box different. It made him a different person. So we need to make person-centered plans, just like we have with developmentally disabled people, to enhance their quality of life. We need to do the same thing with anybody who uses substances, has mental health disorders, is suffering any type of trauma, really. We need to have those plans for those people. And it's going to be individual plans. It's not going to be one, because everybody's different and we need to target those differences.
So after Jordan passed away, what happens to your life?
My life since Jordan passed away is divided into 2 sections. Before Jordan died and after Jordan died, my life as I knew it is over. My friendships are over. My family relationships are gone. Because I need to stand up for Jordan. Because I need to voice for other families that they don't need to go through this alone. And to them, it's hard. It's a hard stigma for them to get through. They don't want to face those things, and they most certainly wouldn't want to support me while I'm going through trying to face these things to make a change. So I've gone through all of my family and friends. I've made an entirely new family out there. Christine has become Mom Stop Them Harm, Tracking Injustice, Carleton University, the coroner's office. I mean, these are the people that have become my everyday people, which is absolutely sad, because my life really is, although Jordan's gone, is all about Jordan and about other kids that I can, or not even kids, they're young adults. I still call them kids because they grew up in my home and played on my couch and video games and slept there and made messes. But when I can still be there for all of those people and they're still there for me, that's what makes the difference. And we need more of that, I think. And the more further we get away from it, the further that humanity is going to be lost. And it's very sad for all of us. So my new life has become advocacy, and not so much just taking care of seniors or developmentally disabled, but going into encampments and bringing lunch or Narcan kits or power supply bars, whatever I can come across to be helpful in any grassroots organization, because I believe these grassroots organizations are healing somebody's heart. And to me, no government-funded organizations can have that power over somebody's soul when they've lost somebody, because I've been in palliative care my whole life. And I could not predict what I was going to go through when I lost my child.